I've been away from the parish for 2 weeks. I had the chance to go to my hometown, Lima, Peru, where everything is very different. Everything is very warm there, very chaotic. And the first day that I arrived to Lima, a lady very graciously came to pick me up from the airport to bring me home. And as soon as the lady saw me, she said, "Father, why are you dressed as a priest?" And then she said, "Father, you look older." And you know what I thought? I thought, I miss Minnesota nice. The gospel this Sunday strikes us and surprises us because we see that the law of Moses was very drastic. The law of Moses said that if a woman was found in adultery, the punishment for that woman would be to be stoned. That's very violent and drastic and severe. Why would Moses be so severe and so violent and so drastic in his measures? Why is it that Moses had decided that if someone committed a sin like adultery, a sin perhaps of weakness, the corresponding punishment would be the punishment of stoning? Isn't it that overly drastic and overly violent? The reason behind the law of Moses was that only if the punishment was severe, people would respect the holiness of God. Moses thought that only if there was a severe punishment, people would think it twice before mocking God and before deciding to betray God's commandments. If you look at the reasoning behind Moses' law, Moses also believed that if you wanted to get rid of sin, you had to get rid of the sinner. Let me repeat this because I think this is crucial. In the law of Moses, the idea is if we want to get rid of the sin, the only way to get rid of the sin is getting rid of the sinner. Once we terminate those who are sinners, then we will get rid of sin, and then the holiness of God would be respected. Behind the law of Moses was also the reasoning that if the punishment was severe, this would deter other people in committing the same sins. Only if they saw the consequences of trespassing God's commandments, then they themselves would think it twice before trespassing God's commandments. That was the reasoning behind the Old Testament and Moses. But if you look at Jesus, Jesus has a very different attitude with the sinner. Moses thought if we want to get rid of sin, we have to get rid of the sinner. But now look at Jesus. Jesus has a very different procedure and method with the sinner. Jesus treats with patience, tenderness, love, and mercy to the sinner. Think about this beautiful detail. It says that while everybody brought the sinner before Jesus, what was Jesus doing? He was writing in the ground, right? Probably writing in the sand. And I heard a beautiful observation about why would Jesus be writing in the ground? The woman, sinner, the adulteress, where would she be looking at if she was a sinner caught in flagrant adultery? When someone has committed a crime and they're brought before the public, what do people tend to do? They tend to cover their face. So when Jesus was writing in the ground, he knew that that's where the lady would be looking at. So while the law of Moses was extremely severe and drastic with the sinner, Jesus is tender and loving with her. And this makes me think very clearly about last Sunday's gospel. Do you remember what's the attitude of the father with the prodigal son? Does the father from last week's gospel, is he severe with his son? Does he chastise his son because he spent all of his fortune? No. He receives him with tenderness and love and mercy, the same treatment that Jesus gives the adulteress in this scene. So now think about this. Moses said, if we want to get rid of sin, we have to get rid of the sinner. How does Jesus solve the problem of sin? How does Jesus think that we can solve the problem of sin? How can we get rid of sin? Jesus gives completely a different formula. He says, he who is free from sin, throw the first stone. So you know what's the formula that Jesus is giving us? He says, you want to get rid of sin? Look at your own life. If you want to get rid of sin, and if you're very zealous about sin, take care of your own life first. Be sure to look at your own life. And this made me think about a beautiful passage from the life of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. The story goes like this. A reporter came to Mother Teresa and he asked her, Mother Teresa, if you had to change something in the church, what will you change? And I'm sure the reporter was saying, oh, I'm going to get a great headline here. Is she going to speak about homosexuals? Is she going to speak about abortion? And you know what Mother Teresa said? She said, if I could change something in the church, I would change you and me. That's how we fix the church. If you take care of you, and if I take care of myself. So in this 5th Sunday of Lent, I think the readings are telling us, if you see a sinner, how do you solve the problem of sin? Do you kill the sinner speaking badly of the sinner? Do you kill the sinner criticizing the sinner? Do you kill the sinner murmuring and speaking behind their backs? Jesus is saying, if you're really concerned about the problem of sin, the only way to solve the problem of sin is taking first care of your own life. So I want to finish with this encouragement. We're very close to Easter. We're only basically 2 weeks away from Easter. If you want to make the most out of the time of Lent that we have left, be sure that you look less at the sin of other people and you start taking care more of your own sin. And I say this first to my own. First, I say this to myself. If I'm really concerned about the problem of sin, instead of criticizing and killing other people with my words, I want to look at my own life and take care of my own life. So my encouragement is, this upcoming week of Lent, be sure to criticize less and look more at your own life. Remember the words of Jesus. If any of you is free from sin, then you can throw the first stone.